Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from beautiful Nashville, Tennessee, where I am visiting for Nashville Pagan Pride this weekend. And today is Wednesday, and as most Wednesdays, our guest today is Krys Copeland. Hello, Krys.
Hi, Reverend Don. Good to see you.
Good to see you. And how are things on the other side of the planet?
Uh, as on fire as everywhere else in the world.
Well, we do have our second moon orbiting. And, if you think about it, you'd expect that to have some major repercussions. And, it arrived with Hurricane Helene and the Corellian lustration. Later today, we will have the video from the lustration coming onto Corellian TV and the transcription of the lustration oracle, which was also rather strong. So lots of interesting things going on with Odin's Eye, the second moon. What else is going on? What's going on with Corellian publications this week?
Well, as you know, with the Odin's Eye, Ed has been posting quite frequently about that as well,
Yes.
due to its ties to Witch Wars Volume 2. And today we've been working on the rough draft for this. We're about halfway finished with it. And so I have a section here that I'd like to just dive into a little bit deeper.
Very cool. And let us say
Yeah.
hello to Antonio in the chat room. Hello, Antonio.
Hi, Antonio. Good to see you.
And hello, Janet in the chat room.
Hi, Janet. Good to see you. So in this section, Reverend Ed takes a deep dive into some of the legal issues that surround reputation wars and a reputational conflict. Ed actually has some experience with this because he's actually been sued before
Yeah.
For libel in the community. So he has information concerning, both how to process through that as the plaintiff as well as the defendant, and gives a lot of great advice about when is it okay to start looking at legal options, when is that necessary, and also kind of how to navigate those issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very curious, have you ever had to deal with anything regarding like legality and in conflict with witch wars in your experiences?
Well, you have to remember that what Edward is writing about, I was also involved in. So I've definitely had that experience. And of course, I've also been on the receiving end of all kinds of libelous accusations over the years. And, one of the things you have to look at in such a situation is whether it's worth doing anything about. One of the things that's caught my attention is the whole Alex Jones case. And, if anyone was ever guilty of libel, it was Alex Jones.
Yes.
And yet look how difficult it's been for the people he wronged to get any kind of justice from him. Even now, well after they won the case. We want to say hello to Bimby and Renee in the chat room.
Hi, Bimby. Hi, Renee.
And the problem is, when you do reply to that sort of thing, it takes years to get anywhere, and in the meantime, you're only augmenting what they're saying. You're giving them a loudspeaker. So it's a very it's not at all a simple question. There are certainly times that when it may be unavoidable, but it's not by any means always the wise thing to do, nor is it inexpensive.
Yeah, that's actually something that Ed talks about in the book itself. He uses the phrase, you need to make sure that the lemon is worth the squeeze. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Well, and so often, in the pagan community, when someone is libeling someone else, even if a court case were pursued and even if a judgment were obtained, there'd be no money to pay it.
Likely, yeah.
And there still have to be lawyers, and those lawyers are very expensive. That's why you don't see more of that sort of thing, even though there's plenty of libel going on in this community at all times. So half the nature of witch wars is libelous accusations.
Yeah, and you brought up a very good point when you talked about how you've actually been accused of quite a few things that you have not done, and it
Hmm.
had like no basis in even reality, much less
Yeah,
fact.
yeah,
But and it was I assumed it was just you you were always quite forgiving anyway, especially if someone asked for
yeah.
forgiveness. But at the same time, you considered, in this case, this person's financial position and whether or not they were, and also their mental position in that situation.
Well, there's
And
that too.
yeah, and that you took that into consideration, and those are some things that Ed talks about in Witch Wars
Hmm.
too, is that you do have to take into consideration how much work would you need to put into pursuing legal action versus one, is it actually going to bring anything positive out of it, and two, is the person going to either learn from their lessons or pay what they need to pay. Yeah, there's a lot involved with making that
Hmm.
decision, and it's not a simple question of right or wrong. It's
No.
a question of how far are you willing to pursue right and wrong.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And not least of all, who's going to pay the lawyers?
Yes.
Because it's not really something you can pursue without lawyers, and it's not something they're going to do, generally speaking, pro bono.
No.
And so it's not a simple thing. And speaking of Ed the Pagan, hello to Ed the Pagan in the chat room.
Hi, Ed. Good to see you. Yeah, you bring up a very good point about the lawyers as well. I do a lot of SEO content for lawyers in
Hmm.
America. And while many of them do work on contingency
Hmm.
basis, where if you don't win, they don't get paid, they won't take on a case unless there's someone that can actually pay them at the end. So if
Yeah,
you go to a contingency fee lawyer and show them your case, if they see that the other person has no means to pay, they will not take your case.
exactly. And hello to Reverend Mary in the chat room, and hello to Janet Gann in the chat room. It's good to see you.
Hi, Reverend Mary. Hi, Janet. Good to see you both.
But these are things people talk about legal this and legal that a lot without actually knowing what all can be involved in it.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah,
And there's also like the legal definition of what actually is defamation.
that too.
And Ed goes through the different like parts that you have to prove with that definition. So there's four parts to it. One is that there has to be a false statement that is made. But and that you have to prove that it's actually a flat out completely untrue. And the second part is that they have publicized it. And this
Mhm.
could be either, verbally by going to the town square and yelling out whatever falsehood against you, or it could
Mhm.
be going on the virtual town square, saying this on Facebook or publishing it in a newspaper.
Mhm.
There's lots of different ways to publicize it.
Yeah,
But yeah, basically that's the second thing you have to prove. And then the third is that there was damage caused by it. Uh,
that's the other thing. Because
that's
I
the third part.
mentioned that over the 50 odd years of my career, I've been on the receiving end of a lot of false statements, but few of them did any provable damage.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes responding to it will cause more damage than somebody's lie caused in the first place.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, and Edward says this is the deep pockets doctrine, which referring to the lawyers, and that that someone has to be able to pay them for a course for a case to go its course. Very, very rarely, maybe if there's a personal relationship somewhere, but that's virtually unheard of. That a lawyer is going to do a case that's going to take years to prosecute, knowing they're not going to get paid. It doesn't happen, at least not in this kind of situation.
Yeah. And that's absolutely true. You have to prove. You have to be able to prove financial damage. You can
Mhm.
try to approve emotional damage too, or
Mhm.
emotional distress, but that does have a lot more difficulty in
Mhm.
proving. And at the same time, it also can depend on the judge that you get as far as how much they count emotional damage in
Mhm.
financial terms. So yeah, there's a lot to navigate with that. And then the final thing that you have to look at is whose fault it is. And let's say they spread a false statement about you. They did it in public, and it damaged your reputation. But they believed it was entirely true, and they were lied to about it, and they were just trying to bring light to what they thought was the truth. Then that can also be a legal hurdle to overcome. It's
Mhm.
the same defense that Alex Jones tried to use. He tried to say
Yeah.
that, oh, well, I all my news sources told me that they were actors, that the parents weren't real parents in the shootings, over the of the children in the shootings. And he tried to claim that it was not his fault because he was misinformed, when in fact he was the one creating the false information and spreading it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it's a complex situation, and the case that Ed the Pagan is referring to in the book, I think people will find fascinating to read about. Um, it happened in the early 1990s. Um, I'm not sure because we had this conversation. I'm not sure that there is another libel case in this community that could be examined because it's far more often talked about than something that actually happens, even with all the libel that's gone through all the witch wars, which very frequently do come down to that.
yeah,
And one of the reasons people feel free to do it is they know they're unlikely to be sued because nobody can afford it. And then there's also, again, that question, are there actual damages? Can you prove that? Um, yeah, sometimes one could, and there's still the question, can you afford it? um, but no, very often the situation is destructive, but not in a way you can necessarily prove in court. And Ed points out it's the only case he knows of
yeah.
in the pagan community. And like I say, I can't think of any other.
Yeah, it is the only case that we were able to find in our research. We did locate some case studies outside of the pagan community that are great examples of what can happen when a defamation case is brought correctly, as well as one that's brought falsely, like in the case of
Mhm.
Ed. It was brought falsely against him.
Yes.
And then so for the one that was actually like a legitimate case of defamation, we took a look at the case of Amber Melvin Brown, who is the lawyer in the situation. But she's a lawyer from the UK, and she specializes in reputation management.
Mhm.
As far as we know, she's not a witch herself, but her work is quite magical. So she represented a well-known British personality who found themselves the target of several tabloids that
Mhm.
were accusing them of all sorts of really nefarious activities. These were we don't go into detail in them in the book, but just if you look up the information yourself, you'll see that the activities he was accused of were really not like inappropriate in any setting, as well
Mhm.
as really illegal.
Yeah.
But they were completely false. They were
Mhm.
completely made up. The accusations were not only baseless, but they were published without any check on
Mhm.
whether or not they were true. So even though the BBC later retracted their statements about him, and the tabloids that also ran with the information, they did retract it. The damage had still been done because of the types of crimes he was accused of in the articles.
Hmm.
So his lawyer, Amber Melvin Brown, was able to prove, by pulling out the documents and the receipts, and this is where her client was actually at, and there's no way this could actually happen, and this is the reasoning behind it. And she was able to get a legal victory that included a lot of damages
Hmm.
in that fee that she was able to secure for her client, as well as public retractions from all of the tabloids.
Mm.
So yeah,
Yeah,
it's
but
an
this was not a
interesting case
witch
to look
war. This was a celebrity.
at. Yes, it was a celebrity, but again, if we're using that term witch war very loosely to just mean
Well,
reputational
yes.
combat, that yeah, because we
Now,
also
Edward
dive
says,
into
well, in the chat room, Edward says one of the reasons that we don't see more of this is that we're afraid of the law, meaning the American pagan community, afraid of getting involved in legal situations. I remember in 1990 something, watching a Chicago high priest physically assault a 17-year-old girl, took her by the neck, lifted her up and shook her in public in front of her own mother. Should have been arrested, certainly should have been sued up one side and down the other, but the mother refused to do anything because she was a closeted pagan who worked at a bank, and she felt she could not go to the law, um, which actually is part of that larger lawsuit story. But whether that's part will be in the book, I don't know. But a lot of our people, they will let things fly because they are afraid of the effects of being too public about it.
Yeah, that's something else that Ed talks about in the book. He brings up a few different cases of people losing their children
Hmm.
over being found out that they were pagan. In particular, one man who lived in a conservative state, he sued his wife for full custody of their children, claiming that her practice of Wicca was actually satanic and was causing damage to the children, and the court sided with her, even though
Mm.
there was no legal evidence showing that Wicca causes any harm to children. So,
Sided with her or sided with him?
sided with him. Yeah,
Mm.
she lost custody of her children, and he gained full custody. So, and this happens all the time to pagan parents. Either they're too afraid to speak out to secure their rights,
Hmm.
or they lose them altogether when they are found out if they live in conservative areas. It happens all the time.
And this is one of the reasons that I come back again and again to Project 2025, which is already increasing that again and could have disastrous results in that area. We want to say hello to Daniel in the chat room, if I didn't already say hello, and to Steve in the chat room. It's good to see you both.
Hi, Daniel. Hi, Steve. Good to see you.
But yeah, these are some of the things that, when you pick up a book on witch wars, you probably aren't expecting a detailed examination of the legal issues, but that actually is really important. And so often pagans don't know the legal issues. People talk about things like libel without understanding what the definition is or what has to be proven to mount a case.
Yeah. And Daniel brings up an interesting case. I know about this case that he brings up. It's a real life case where a guy won $400,000 for the emotional damage of his coworkers throwing him an office birthday party. So that sounds like really outrageous. It kind of reminds you of the story of the old lady that got burned by McDonald's coffee, and she sued the company, and how silly is that, because coffee is hot, but in fact this coffee was caused third-degree burns on her body
Hmm.
over large portions of her body, and she actually did have a huge right to sue them.
Hmm.
But
It
there's a
was
similar.
more than just hot, and they had been warned by the police repeatedly that they could not do that. It was not the first. It was the worst event, but not the first one.
Yes, and this case is actually quite similar. On the surface, it appears that, well, this is bogus. They were just trying to throw him a nice birthday party.
Mm-hmm.
But this man had severe autism
Mm-hmm.
and severe social anxiety, and asked them multiple times, please don't do this, because I know that you do this for everybody, but please do not do this for me, because I will have a panic attack and I will shut down, and I don't want to do that at work. And they
Mm-hmm.
threw the party for him anyway, and of course, he had a panic attack and shut down, and they fired him over it. And so he actually sued them for firing him.
Yeah, so
And
it
that's why
wasn't that
he
he
sued
sued
them.
them over the birthday party, he sued them over an unjust firing.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah.
And hello to Zane in the chat room. It's good to see you, Zane.
Hi, Zane. Good to see you.
So we're just slightly past the half-hour mark, so let us take a moment to hear from our sponsor. Ready to unlock the secrets of the universe? Join me, Reverend Don Lewis, for my metaphysical and magic auctions at Gaia Thrift at whatnot.com. Discover fascinating artifacts, mystical crystals, and rare and unusual books that could change your life. Don't miss this chance to bring a little magic into your world. Reverend Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions, where the extraordinary can become yours. And thank you to our sponsors, Equinox Learning Hub and Reverend Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions. And our next auction will be Sunday evening at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. And I hope that you will join us for that, because we'll have some interesting things. And hello to Nikki in the chat room. It's good to see you, Nikki.
Hi, Nikki. Good to see you.
So, what else do we have on our list for today?
Well, some of the other things that Ed covers in this section on legality and issues of that is also, if you do plan on taking a case, here's how you can do that, and in a way that will um, more likely lead towards victory. Here's what you need to do. And so it starts with organization, and he talks a lot about documenting communication with this person, with the person that you believe has defamed you, and also how to try to prevent them from being able to claim that they have a right to do it by adding it to your contracts and agreements with them. There's a special type of clause that you can add to it called the non-disparagement clause, which basically says that if they do learn something about you that you would rather not have made public for whatever reason, then it can help deter them from doing that if you have like a contract with them. And I think this one is great. Let's say you're doing an expose book on somebody, and this other person is helping you with it. And that person reads what you write in that book and then publishes all the information before you get to, and accuses you of maybe even lying about the claims that you're making in the book. If you have a non-disparagement clause in your contract with that person, whoever is working with you on the book, then that would then allow you to sue them in court. Now, it's not a guarantee, but it is a deterrent nonetheless.
Yes, indeed.
And there's also a lot of information on what types of records to keep, not just the communications records, but any financial records related to the situation, and also how to collect testimonials from other character witnesses. That's super important. That you want to, make sure you get everybody's point of view who was in on that situation. And I think that can even help, even if you're just investigating a situation. Let's say you're not taking it through the legal process, but maybe you're taking it through the process within your own coven or your own circle. Gathering testimonials from everyone who is involved in that situation can be super helpful when analyzing that evidence and determining who is at fault, how they're at fault, and what reparation they need to make in that situation. Yeah, so those
fascinating subject.
Yeah, absolutely. And also he gives a lot of advice for like how to decide on whether or not it is legal action, but also ways to prevent legal action. Things like writing a cease and desist letter instead. That can often deter people who are making untrue statements about you online. And the cool thing about that is like ChatGPT now can write a cease and desist letter for you, and has in multiple cases where people have used ChatGPT to write cease and desist letters and actually got the person to stop saying the defamatory things. It could be as simple as that. If you have someone who is trashing your reputation online, sending a strongly worded letter might actually have some impact on them.
It could certainly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I find in the many years that I've been around, one of the things I've noticed is that by and large, the pagan community has a very poor understanding of legalities. The average pagan has no idea how copyrights work. I mean, I have watched people climb up on soapboxes to preach about copyrights and be entirely wrong in what they're saying. Libel. Yeah, I mean, it's good to have some accurate statement on it that maybe some people will listen to.
Yeah, absolutely. And Daniel says he's blessed to live in Maryland and Northern Virginia, where it's not thought of that someone could lose their children for being pagan. He says that sounds very disturbing. And yeah, you're absolutely right, Daniel. A lot of the stories and the case studies that we found came from southern states or very red states, and there's a lot of pagans that are having a lot of issues with the local government, with the local police, CPS even. So yeah, it's a challenge for a lot of pagan parents that are living in these communities that are a little, I don't want to use the word civilized, but a little less civilized than the rest of the United States.
And Mary says, LOL, I have listened to copyright lectures while I Googled. But yeah, I mean, we're very close to the end of our half hour, so I don't want to go charging into copyright. But I've heard some of the most ridiculous statements, and I probably have had more copyrights than the vast majority of pagan personalities. And at one time, I had a copyright lawyer who was licensed to practice in front of the Supreme Court. I know copyright law. And I've found that most pagans don't have a clue. They think it means something very different from what it really means. And I think talking about these things in a place where people can actually get good information would be very valuable to people.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll continue this conversation next week on the legalities, and as well as different case studies from around the world, because it's not just in the United States that people are experiencing these issues. In fact, in many countries, it can be a lot worse for people, that their lives are at risk even more than their livelihood or the custody of their children.
Yeah, and it's also important to remember the laws may be different in other places. Where you are in the Netherlands, I believe that the laws are probably far more favorable than many parts of the United States. Not necessarily all, but many.
Yeah,
But we have
absolutely.
people, I mean, we often have people who are joining us from India or um, sometimes Africa, parts of South America. The laws can be very different there, and it depends where you're at. Yeah, it's a very diverse international situation. Um,
And it's the same thing as we see with the queer community. Until all of us are safe, none of us are safe, and it's the same in
mhm,
paganism. Until all of us are safe, none of us are safe.
yeah. So with that, we've come to the end of our half hour. Thank you, Krys, for joining me.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I will be back tomorrow when I will be talking about your third eye and Odin's eye, and using the power of Odin's eye to help with your third eye and clairvoyant and oracular practices. Tomorrow night, I will be doing a workshop called Walking with the Discarnate. Um, I think I have quoted that correctly. Yeah, Walking with the Discarnate. You can find information for that on my Facebook page and numerous other platforms that you may be seeing this video on. And it's not too late to sign up. It will be recorded also for posterity in the future. And it will be talking about working with the ancestors and the Correllian ancestors, the Correllian tradition ancestors in particular. So that will be fascinating. And then again on Saturday, I will be at Nashville Pagan Pride, and we'll be bringing you video and photography from that. And on Sunday at 7 p.m., we'll be doing our next metaphysical and magic auction from Gaia Thrift. So thank you, thank you. Thank you, Krys. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And let us close with our prayer, as we always do. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, help us as we go forward under the two moons in the sky to take the best advantage of all the opportunities that are afforded to us. Help us to build our lives in the directions we want them to go, to clear out the old and make way for the new, and embrace the good. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love, and knowing you are always with us, we thank you for your presence, and may be blessed now and always. May you be blessed now and always. And thank you again, Krys. And I will see everybody tomorrow. Blessed
Blessed
be.
be.